To create a clean heart in me, a conversation on recovery with John Rosengren and Dick Rice. We're so grateful to have two incredible men here with us tonight to talk about recovery and all the aspects that go along with that. John has written a book, A Clean Heart, which is the focus of the meeting tonight. We're going to post a link in the chat that'll link you to the Amazon store there, so you can buy a copy. He is a local guy here in Minnesota, and so if you can support him, we would be appreciative, and I'm sure he would be appreciative. John has written numerous books, written for numerous national publications, and even was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. So his repertoire and his experience with writing, coupled with his own recovery journey, creates a pretty powerful story. And to have Dick Rice along with him is a pretty special moment here. Dick has retired from being the spiritual director at the retreat several years ago, and has not been on the circuit like he used to be. Dick used to do a lot of speaking to people in the recovery community, and really has devoted his life to carrying the message, and has always loved working with people early in recovery, and is a absolute dear friend of mine. And I'm just so grateful to have these two men here tonight. The format is going to be the discussion. So they're going to have a discussion around the topic of recovery and implementing the book. And then we also want to make this interactive. So a couple different ways that you'll be able to do that is chatting. So through the chat, you'll be able to ask questions, or we will be able to have you unmute your microphone and ask questions later. We'll prompt you when that comes. I do want to let everybody know that we are recording this event here. So just be mindful that way. And if you don't want to be on video, that's okay. You can just stop your video when you ask a question. So we just want to capture this moment for other people to be able to enjoy it later. So without further delay here, we'll welcome John Rosengren and Dick Rice.
Oh, thank you, Sol.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sol, and thank you to the retreat for hosting this and providing the forum for us to have this discussion about recovery.
Yes, I am so glad to be here. I'm still alive, Sol. Thank you. John, if I may start, my hope for tonight, I've been praying and meditating about this, would be that we would deepen our own recovery and invite all of those who are with us to deepen theirs, especially the walk of the 12 steps. In that regard, I'd like to start right away with the title. It is such a evocative, if not a provocative title that you were given, and I say given, almost inspired, I think. A Clean Heart. How did the title come to you, and tell me what it has meant to you as you've written the book?
Well, it's a good question. So, as people can see, that is, whoops, something happened there where my screen went funny. Huh. I don't know why that happened. Can you hear me, Dick?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I don't know why my video stopped. I'm trying to get it to go again, but it says the host has asked you to start my video. Okay, here we go. Yeah, all right. So the title is Clean Heart. And I'd had several ideas, different title ideas as I was working on the manuscript and this book, and none of them really seemed to fit. And then I worked in Psalm 51 is my favorite Psalm, and I worked in a passage from Psalm 51 later, and Sister Mary Xavier quotes it. And it just seemed to me that line, a clean heart, or the phrase, a clean heart, from that line, create in me a clean heart, oh God. It just seemed to fit so well for this book, which is about people trying to find recovery from their addiction, but also for this conversation. I just love this line, create in me a clean heart, oh God, put a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence, nor deprive me of your Holy Spirit. It's like, don't abandon me, God. Stay with me. Don't leave me. And the way it begins, this psalm, have mercy on me, God, in your kindness. It's like, that's so much, I think, the third step too of, and the second step, believing that there's a God that can help restore us to sanity, and that and we're turning our will life over the care of God. Oh, wash me more and more from my guilt and cleanse me from my sin. This is somebody who's racked with guilt and about something they've done, and they're asking God, please, please take me back. Love me again. Let me feel your love. Make me hear you rejoicing in gladness, that the bones you have crushed may revive. It just, I love the psalm. And so it spoke, I guess, to the themes of recovery and redemption. And we come to this, the program, I think, or our recovery begins with our own brokenness. And so, like, the voice of this psalm, I just think speaks so well to that idea that I'm trying to or that I'm going after in this novel of how people find redemption and recovery, and it's through the surrender. And as this psalm speaks so well to that. So I've rambled long and probably said way more than you wanted to hear. I apologize.
Oh, no, John, that's just exactly the direction I was hoping we'd go tonight. The first word of that psalm that you quote deep in the book, as you said in Sister's words, God created me a clean heart, might be the point I want to make most tonight in our conversation, that this is a God-centered, God-initiated recovery that we're talking about. This is not any kind of a self-help or even community help recovery that we're talking about in terms of our lives. I was invited recently to participate in a book where the editor asked a number of us to give one sentence that we would say if we only had one sentence to contribute to humanity. And the one sentence I chose is, there is a higher power and I'm not it.
Mm-hmm.
And I stand by that. And it's what we land on in the first step. We are powerless over alcohol, and our lives have become unmanageable. Who do we turn to? Who is there? And that's where the world, with the second step, and certainly the third, opens up to the very God you've been speaking of. A God who not only we're begging to have mercy on us, but who has had mercy on us. Time and time again, he has. She has.
Yeah. Right. Well, I agree. It's that idea we aren't doing this alone, right? That we need the help of others, and we help others, which is, I believe, how this program works. And we start by helping serving others. And so and we need others, and we need our higher power, whom we often find.
Hello?
Well, the internet strikes again. We might have.
Am I back?
Now you're back.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know what happened there. I lost my internet connection. But can you hear me now?
Can hear you now. I missed every other word, basically, John. If you can go back and repeat the heart of what you just said.
Oh my God, it was so profound.
It was.
No, it was, the idea is that we're not alone, that we are, this program is of recovery is we help others, others help us, and we don't do it alone. And it's through the grace of our higher power that we connect with others, and often we discover our higher power through others. So that's
Yes.
the idea.
One of the things that's always been fundamental for me is to realize it all depends on the first word of the first step. That this is not, if Bill W. had been inspired to write, I have acknowledged or admitted I'm
Are you
powerless
there?
over alcohol. Pardon me? Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. Now I can. Yes.
Oh. If Bill W. had been inspired to write, I have admitted that I'm powerless over alcohol and my life had become unmanageable, there wouldn't be any 12 steps. We'd still be struggling with our recovery in all likelihood. The very inspiration of the word we, this is a community. It's not a program that we're talking about. This is a community of people who land together on the first step and carry each other on the following steps up to recovery. I had to call my own home group the other day, not to task exactly, but to remember that the first word of each step is we. We sometimes take that for granted and don't exactly acknowledge that we admitted, we turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. We continue to take an inventory, and when wrong, promptly admit it. So exactly what you're saying is music to my ears, John.
Well, yeah, it's something you've helped teach me, and others that I've gotten to know through this program, that it's all of us in this together and not just one of us trying to do it.
Bring that to the book, because you've got this wonderful staff at your recovery center in the book. And it's a we that's like all of us in recovery. How did these characters come to you? And what's the amalgam is a wonderful group of people actually helping each other into recovery.
Well, it's just one big happy family, right? So I worked in this treatment center out in Boise, Idaho, and it was crazy, just the craziest place. And there are secrets and power struggles, and nobody trusted each other, and that was with the staff. So
for starters,
yeah, they were the inspiration. And I might add too, I got fired from that job after about 4 months. So I think that was a testament to my sanity. I wasn't crazy enough to fit into the dysfunctional system, or at least that's what I told myself. But so in this treatment center in A Clean Heart, 6 West, is run by a nun who's got an MBA and is a heavy drinker herself. And, she sort of sets the dysfunction in motion with her use and her desire to make a profit, or efforts to turn a profit with this unit. And she entraps, I guess, Carter, the main character, one of the counselors, in her plan. And then there are all these other, the supporting cast, each has his or her own issues. The nurse, Judy, the head nurse, is, a raging codependent, trying to control and fix everything, and works sort of a perverted version of the program. And she's dangerous with just a little bit of knowledge of the 12 steps and how they work. There's a young intern who's, smitten by Sister Mary Xavier as this example of a career-driven woman who becomes disillusioned as she gets to know Sister Mary Xavier more. There's Natalie, the love interest of Carter, who has a sort of serenity from her own brokenness that she came to grips with and accepted. And then there's also Buddha, who was one of my favorite characters, because he's just this.
Mine too.
He's just he's maybe the only happy one on the staff. He just has a serenity about him that it seems to help and buoy and calm Carter. And then of course there's the doctor who the on staff who is disgusted with Sister Mary Xavier and her behavior, and wants to hold her accountable. So they all kind of come together and clash, and it's a melange of craziness. But somehow through it, the grace of the higher power moves, and some of these kids get helped, and even some of the staff find their way to recovery.
Yes. Oh, well put. Thank you. I have to admit that once I met her, I was trying to guess who was going to play Sister Xavier in the movie edition of this. So far it's Tina Fey. I don't have a better choice, but she's my choice for the Sister Xavier in the movie.
Yeah, I suppose Judi Dench is a little too old.
A little too old, right? Yes. I want to choose one of those characters, so much in a sense the protagonist, Carter. Carter is more complex than he appears at first glance, because so much of his life, of course, is trying to get the mud of his relationship with his mother off of his shoes, or at least clean his shoes so that he can live with her in a healthy way. How did that relationship come to you, and how do you think it was resolved by the end of the book?
Well, it was given to me in a vision. No, I'm just kidding. I have a mother.
So do I. Yep.
And I was a young child once. And I'll leave it at that. From there, it became fiction. It grew from there. And my mother does want, she's not an alcoholic like Carter's mother in the novel. But, I think a lot of us have issues with our parents and are trying to work those out. And Carter does, for sure. And he loves his mother, but there's this sort of dangerous emotional enmeshment between the two that gets formed when he's very young. And for him to be free, he needs to be able to extricate himself from that, and not to stop loving his mother, but to be able to, in a gentle, caring, compassionate way, let go of trying to save her anymore. And, she's dying of alcoholism. We learn early on, not a spoiler alert, but that since he's a counselor in a treatment center and he's trying to help people into recovery, kind of his instinct is to want to save his mother. And eventually he has to accept that he cannot do that, though it's not an easy moment for him, and probably not, not for any of us. Right? We see someone we love who's suffering, and we want to get in there and help them, and we think we can do that by fixing them. And unfortunately, many of us learn the hard way, or that's not possible.
Yes.
Okay, Dick, now I get to ask you a question. I'd like to ask you a question. Can we use that as a segue for you to tell the story of how you got into Al-Anon? Because you told me that the other day, and I love that story. I'd love to hear it again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I have, Al-Anon was the community of the 12-step community that I came into first. I could belong to, I think, almost any 12-step group that exists today. But I came into Al-Anon over half a lifetime ago, and I came into it because I was dealing with the alcoholism of my father. And I was a perfect firstborn in an Irish Catholic family, which means I was taking a lot of responsibility. I was so busy taking responsibility that I wasn't doing much on behalf of the family except agonizing. And finally, a friend of mine confronted me and said, as she saw my own deterioration and my own going deeper into depression, she said, Dick, I'm going to stand here until you tell me you're either going into Al-Anon or you're going into some kind of psych unit yourself to get help for yourself and your depression. I'll be eternally grateful to Mary Ellen for standing there at my side until I did that. I told her, just to get her off my back, basically, that I'll give Al-Anon a try, I would say at that time. And as it turned out, my office at that time was in the back of St. Joe's Hospital in St. Paul, and about 100 steps down the hall was an outpatient clinic for Hazelton. It existed, I think, for about a half an hour, maybe 6 months. Nobody could find it. And eventually they moved the office over to Grand Avenue, but it was right there when I needed it. As so often is true of us in recovery, the help is there when we need it. reach for it right at that time. And I did. I walked the 100 steps down the hall and walked into the receptionist's office at this Hazelton outpatient clinic, as I said, and mentioned the state I was in. I was absolutely desperate. My dad was dying of alcoholism, and I couldn't do anything about it and didn't know how to do any more to signal the family and gather the family to do something about it. I was weeping by the time I had finished telling her the story, just briefly. And she looked at me and smiled and said, "Welcome home. We're starting a 4-night-a-week intensive tonight for Al-Anon folk like yourself. You'll be here at 7 o'clock tonight and you'll find yourself at home." I walked into a meeting at 7 o'clock that night, one of 2 or 3 men among 40 people, obviously most of them women, and I've been at home ever since in the Al-Anon community. And I was there for my sake, had to give up any hopes of my dad's recovery, as it turned out, and it's his story. A few years later, my dad realized he had a problem, flew up here, of all places, to St. Mary's Hospital, which is a little reminiscent of your book and the cast of characters in the team. My dad went into St. Mary's Hospital and walked out 30 days later and never drank again. He was sober the rest of the last 10 years of his life, God bless him. He wasn't in recovery. That was his stuff. I wish he had been in recovery. He could have dealt with his emotions, especially, a lot better than he was able to. My words for it were he didn't know a feeling from a football or a bocce ball. But that was his stuff, and he died sober. I'm very grateful for that. And I will always be grateful that I'm in recovery the rest of my life and don't want to be anywhere else.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. I love that story. Welcome home, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's so important to me too. Home. And that's how I feel at every meeting. Welcomed or not, whether I'm in town with my home group or not, still there's an element of welcome home. You'll know the right community for you, and if they're really doing the 12 steps well, if you have that sense of welcome home from the first 15 minutes you're among the folk, if they've welcomed you in such a way. If they don't, then they're not really a functioning 12-step group in my mind. Go elsewhere for your recovery, whether you're an alcoholic or an Al-Anon or an Emotions Anonymous or whatever.
Yeah. Well, there's that sense, I find, of belonging among people who have lived experience like our own, who can understand in ways that others can't because they've been there. I mean, those are the people that when I say something in a meeting that I just think is so terrible about myself or awful that I've done, these are the people that laugh because they can relate. They understand what it's like to be there. And so I feel at home. I mean, this is my family, the people I know in recovery. And I'm just so grateful for that. And this community that we have of recovery, because it is home.
So often the best words we can say with each other, we'll sit there with each other in a meeting, keeping basic silence, and yet to be able to just say to someone what you've just said, I understand, can make all the difference in the world for a person being at home on that particular step and continuing the climb. I talk about the climb because for me, the 12 steps, I like the line a lot, and it's not original to me. They're steps out of hell. They're not steps into heaven, but they are steps out of hell. And I want to climb those steps with anyone that will climb them with me.
Mm-hmm. So it made me think of Dante's Inferno, and we're going in the other direction with Virgil, our sponsor, leading us out instead of in.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I have another question for you. Is how are you dealing with the pandemic and how are the 12 steps helping you deal with the pandemic, and what are you finding helpful in terms of coping?
Mm-hmm. Oh, John, a good question. And I'd ask you to answer it also. And maybe we can open it up then to others who are with us on this video. I am so grateful at this time to be a 12-stepper and to be coping with the pandemic very centrally by climbing the steps and doing the program. I had a realization earlier today that I'm hearing all of this talk about pandemic fatigue and how tired people are getting of it. And to my sense, we're going to be in it for a long time, a lot longer now. We better get used to it. I was a cross-country runner in school and realized this is exactly my kind of situation. I'm not a sprinter, I'm not a half miler, but this is a long distance race. And so the big things that have been important to me are whatever I'm doing daily, especially what I'm doing with my wife. I am so fortunate to be married to Rosemarie, who's not in the program or the community, but respects my being in the community and in the program and joins me especially in something like the regularity of our prayer and meditation. We pray together every morning, pray together every evening. Our grace before meals is very sacred to us, to give thanks for whatever and however God has been to us in the previous 3 hours. So I say to people, I sound like a monk in a monastery. The important thing for me has been to assume a regular life. That's exercise, as was true before dinner tonight, going out for a walk, especially the prayer and meditation, our eating, and our staying as safe as we can. A big thing to me, if any of us on this video with us are feeling isolated and feeling sorry for ourselves, which is such a dangerous place for us to be, what I would encourage is find someone that you can reach out to. Make one call a day to someone that you can reach out to. Whatever, you don't need any excuse. Just to say, I'm checking in with you and wonder how you're doing today. The movement from isolation to intimacy in a phone call like that can make all the difference in the world in terms of more than making it through these days. We're not on this earth, even during the pandemic, to just survive. We're here to thrive as best we can through these days, curveball as they are to what we're accustomed to. And so nothing I have found is finally quite so activating for my spirit as who can I call today who might appreciate a phone call, or I will at least appreciate calling her or him if they don't appreciate it. That's a starter anyway to what you asked, John. How do you answer the same question?
Well, I gotta say, I really like that idea too of picking up the phone, and that's something I think we have learned in AA how to do. Pick up the phone, reach out, and get outside of ourselves. And it's so important during these times, as you said, moving out of the isolation, because it's so easy to feel isolated. I was talking to a guy the other day. He was walking by. He's in lives in my neighborhood. He's in the program, and we were talking, "How you doing?" And he said, I feel like we've been training for this all along, because it's all those things we learn in the program of to be grateful, to think about what am I grateful for? The Serenity Prayer. What can I control? What can I not? I pray for the serenity to accept what I cannot control. And so much of this, as well as the bigger picture with the political situation, everything, it's out of my control. I can't do a lot about it. And so I pray for the wisdom to know what I can do, the courage to do it, and then the serenity to accept what I can't. For me, finding joy and looking for beauty has been important. There was a monk meeting years ago who said, every day we should pause in awe of at least two things. And, that could be a squirrel out hunting for nuts. It could be my dog. It could be a smile from a stranger. Although we don't see a lot of those, I guess, with the masks on now, but it could be, it could be the snowfall, the snow on the trees. I mean, it's a slushy thing. It can be an inconvenience, but at the same time, it's beautiful. And so just looking for those things, trying to have that attitude of acceptance and appreciation, and looking for ways I can help others. And I guess allowing myself to be inspired. I have a friend, actually a sponsee, who has been baking bread for people. And so he's baking bread and giving away these loaves of bread. And he has a neighbor who lost her husband. And so he baked her loaf of bread, and they'd hardly said a word to one another prior to this. And now they're like best buddies. They sit out on the porch and they talk about their deep, fears and painful experiences. And it's like such a moment of Eucharist, right? But of reaching out to another person with a kind gesture, and finding intimacy, as you mentioned, from that. So I think it's trying to be aware of moments like that, and look for them. And I know that there's a lot of suffering, and I have and it's not just related to the pandemic. I mean, I have friends who've been diagnosed with very serious ailments, and but it's trying to, I guess, to be present with them, to be present with others, to again, I guess I go back to doing those things we have learned how to do in the program. And just to follow up on one and close this up with one thing you mentioned was, you said how you pray during the day. And I remember you telling me one time that you feel like you have to pray about every 3 hours, because you start to forget if you go longer than that about how important your higher power's role is. And I find myself that the remembering is so important, to remember the things that I've learned so that I can apply them to my life. Like, I know, I ought not to yell at other drivers. I know that, but I don't always remember that, and so I don't always have the grace to remember that and be calm and just let things go. I forget. And so it is important for me to maintain that sense of that connection with my higher power. And again, the daily meditation, exercise, fresh air, all that too. Anyway, those are some thoughts I have.
Oh, I'll pick up on a couple of them. Very well said. Not every wise person, but a number of them that I've had the opportunity to speak with, whether they're Native American or Buddhist, or the monks up at St. John's, or the sisters up at St. Ben's, they live a life true to what you just gave back to me, that realization that give me 3 hours and I'll get more caught up in the work of my hands than I will in the God who's gracing me with this time. We have about a 3-hour span, it seems, where we go from God consciousness and awareness to back being enmeshed in our own stuff and our own self. That's why so many communities pause every few hours to be at prayer. And we can do that. We can become monks or Buddhists in our daily lives. And something as simple as just grace before meals. Grace is a real word that shines out of your book, John, for me. The grace of recovery, the grace of presence to each other, the grace a couple of your reviewers mentioned in some fine reviews in the frontispiece of the book. A friend of mine has the phrase, you almost said it, gratitude is the attitude of beatitude. Grace and gratitude are more than kissing cousins. They come from the same root. If there's one word that I want to take into my night and give to anybody here, it's anchor yourself in gratitude. If I look at what I have been given, I will be grateful. If I look to what I don't have, especially at this time when we're so aware of what we don't have that we seem to have had as recently as 6 months ago, if I look to what I don't have, I could be miserable very quickly. If you want to just anchor yourself best, just thank you, thank you, thank you to a caring God. Just to touch on that we almost got there earlier, the care, we turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. Throughout your book, I just see that care of God through every page. I had the chance some years ago, wasn't a chance exactly, I took the opportunity to call the World Library of AA in New York City to ask them where Bill W. got the word care in the third step. Why doesn't Bill W. just say we turn our will and our lives over to God? Where did he get that word care? The librarian on duty, at least at that time, said, no one's ever asked that question. I'll get back to you in a few days. I got a call back in a few days. I got the message. I didn't speak to the librarian directly. The message was simply, I have no idea where Bill W. got the word care. So I've been left, and as a student of language myself, the etymology of the word care is, I am with you through it all. I ache with you. I am with you. I give you everything you need, but I don't fix things. I don't make them all better. And sooner or later, climbing the steps, the revelation of a higher power who is with us through it all becomes evident, I think. And then we know we're in graduate school and climbing the steps. So there's more than I thought I was going to say, but thanks for prompting that.
Yeah. Well, first off, you make me nostalgic for those days before Google when we would call the reference desk and ask a question.
Right.
I love doing that. And I love librarians because they usually did have the answer or would come back with it. Though yes, I think I love that, what you say about care and what it means, because that's a God I can relate to, right? One who cares for me. And it makes it so much, it's hard enough to turn over my will, but when I realize I'm doing it to the care of God, that makes it so much easier. And yes, a lot of this, the themes of my novel is how people are learning to surrender, that's the beginning of recovery, is once we surrender, and we surrender to God's will. But also that idea of being present with another. Dale Carnegie, who's a priest I greatly admire, and whose homilies are some of the best I've ever heard, once in a homily told the story of a guy who'd fallen down a hole, and he sees people passing by, and he's calling for help, and no one's stopping. And finally someone he recognizes a friend, and the friend leans over and says, Joe, is that you down there? Yeah, it's me. And the friend jumps down into the hole. And then Joe looks at him and says, well, what'd you do that for? And he said, well, I didn't want you to be down here by yourself. And that idea of Joe's thinking he needs a ladder, but what he really needs is the presence of his friend. And that's what we can provide to one another. We can't always help them out of the hole, but we can be there with them. And that's what we ask of our higher power too, to be there with us. And that's grace, as I understand it, is when God is active and present in our lives, and also when we are aware of that activity and presence of our higher power. I think that's grace. And so I think Carter, the protagonist in the novel, realizes that he can't save others, and especially this kid Oscar that he cares about and he's been sort of tasked with saving. But he realizes he can be present with them. And I think it's once Oscar recognizes that he's able to move toward that point of surrender. Don't want to give it away. Don't want to tell you how it happened, but there's that power there. And like I said earlier too, we don't have to do this alone. It's the fellowship of the presence we have as together as a community, as a family, I think that helps us again experience God's grace. And that happens whether there's a pandemic going, or who's in the White House, or whatever we're facing. Really, it's we can offer that to one another.
I'm sure we have people with us who are saying tonight, lucky for you two, or fortunate for you two, but I've never known a higher power like you're talking about. My higher power is mean or vindictive or not caring or not present at all. And I say dismiss all those other higher powers that we were schooled in so well in family and too often in church, as well as in school, and give way, make possible the resurrection for yourself of a caring God. How do you get there? Just start giving thanks for all that you haven't done yourself. All that you have to acknowledge is a gift from some other power that's been caring for you. Start giving thanks. Keep a journal of gratitude if it would help. Do that cumulatively, and you will start to see a God emerge who's a caring God very personally for you. And all those other previous gods, we can quit worshiping at their altars and even forgive those who schooled us too well in worshiping at their altars. So,
Well, it's like I go back to the Psalm 51, right? Where
yes.
it says, do not cast me away from your presence, nor deprive me of your Holy Spirit. Give me again the joy of your help. With a spirit of fervor, sustain me. And oh, rescue me, God, my helper. My tongue shall ring out your goodness. I think it's, some have been raised with that image of a mean or vindictive, judgmental God, the fire and brimstone God looking for the slightest infraction or justification to damn you to hell. But that's not what I get from this psalm. I mean, I get this,
Right.
Have mercy on me, God, in your kindness, that care that you were talking about, in your compassion, blot out my offense. That idea that there's this higher power that cares about us, that's willing to forgive us and accept us and embrace us and give us the joy, or restore us to rejoicing. That's a higher power I can relate to.
Yes.
And want to get to know.
And how do we get to know that higher power? The best entree I know is just start giving thanks for all that you cannot explain of yourself. I almost said it before, but a little line that is not unique to me, but I like a lot is religion is for those who are trying to avoid hell. Spirituality is for those who have already been there. We're talking about a spirituality here. So many religious people are trying to earn in some way the favor of God. That's not a God we want to worship. That will never stand the test of time. We're worshiping a God who's a God of spirit and of grace, and for us of gratitude. So we're talking spirituality here rather than religion, as many of us were introduced to it and grew up in it.
Yeah, thanks for making that distinction. I think that's important.
Can we include any others in, especially around that question of what's getting us through the pandemic gracefully? So can we open this up to others?
Yeah, absolutely.
If I can't see if people have been asking questions, or if there are questions. I'd love to hear them and entertain them. Okay. Well, if you have questions, if you have comments, please leave them in the chat, and Dick and I would be glad to respond to them.
Yeah, you can leave them in the chat, or if you want to unmute your microphone and just ask a question right now, you can do that as well.
Yeah, I'd be happy to say a couple things here if I could. It's just can you hear me okay? Am I unmuted?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is, one of the great gifts I think that I've had in my life, particularly during this time of COVID, is the gift of being able to go out to the retreat every day and, talk to people who are searchers and who are trying to ask the difficult questions in their life. And I'm a believer that we find God through mutually shared vulnerability, that the more vulnerable I can be with you and you with me, there's a power and an energy that happens between us that's beyond us. And so it's been a real blessing, I think, for me to be able to run around the hallways and talk to alcoholics every day and meet with people who, are asking the tough questions. And I'm also, Dick, you mentioned gratitude. I recall 44 years ago, I was living at Fellowship Club, 23-year-old long-haired kid. And I had this, they gave me this sticker to put on my mirror in my bedroom, so that every morning I'd have to look at this sticker on my mirror. And the sticker said, "The attitude is gratitude." And it was just simply that if you can start your day off with a grateful heart, you're more likely to find God. And I found that to be true. I was blessed with an opportunity to ask the Dalai Lama a question years ago when he came to town. And I asked him, I said, if I could have one daily practice to enhance my spiritual life, what would it be? And he said, live your life with a warm and grateful heart, and practice love and compassion for everybody that you see in your day. Now, what an order. I mean, that's like in the traffic, in the lunch line, at home, in my meetings, in my work meetings. It is, the opportunity to have a warm heart is with me throughout the day, thousands of times. And I have to say, I don't take that opportunity. I don't jump on that train all the time, but when I do, I feel a presence that is beyond all of us. So anyway, it's really wonderful to hear both of you talk, and you just, to me, exude what we're talking about tonight, the warm heart message. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
You bless us with your words, John. I want to pick up that word vulnerable that you said early on. It's a favorite of mine, but the etymology of the word, of course, is able to be wounded. And we are a people who have been wounded a lot. I like a lot the title of a book by Henri Nouwen, Wounded Healers. It's who we all are. And you and I think, correct me, John, if you think otherwise, but our willingness to be vulnerable depends on how we've been healed of our wounds from the past. And we've realized that our higher power has been with us too, that our scars have become beauty marks by this time, increasingly to us. And so, having done our work, we're willing to be vulnerable to one another. A synonym of that might be available to one another. Though we've been wounded a lot in the past, but we're healing all the time of that and willing to take a chance again on putting ourselves out there. So thank you for introducing the word vulnerable to the conversation.
Well, you're welcome. It takes a lot of therapy and men's groups and adult children of alcoholics groups and to do some of that healing. But you got to do the work.
You're doing it, brother.
So Dick and John, we have a question from Stacia. Do each of you have an example you can share where your higher power was caring for you specifically?
Wow. Yeah, the first thing that popped into my mind was, as you might imagine, being a teenage drug addict, I had a strained relationship with my father. We also shared a love of baseball. And so years ago when I saw the movie Field of Dreams, there's a scene with Kevin Costner and his father and how they reconcile. And I wept when I saw that, and I knew I wanted to see the movie with my dad. And so I called him up, and he hadn't seen it. So we went back and we watched the movie together. And afterward, I said, Dad, there are times where I It wasn't who I wanted to be. I said things I wish I hadn't said, and did things I wish I hadn't done. And I apologize. I hope you'll forgive me. And he said, yes, I forgive you. And, I did things I wished I hadn't, and I said things I wished I hadn't, and I apologize. And will you forgive me? And I said, yes, of course. And, I get emotional thinking about it because it was such a profound moment. We'd driven separately, and after that, we embraced and we walked separately to our cars. And I had the feeling that I could die at that moment and it would be okay because I'd made peace with my father. And there was such a sense of grace in that moment, of my higher power being there present between the two of us, and allowing that moment to be possible. So that's the example that first comes to mind of a time when I felt like something happened like that in my life that was just so profound that I knew my higher power was a part of it.
Well, your story, John, drives me deeper than I thought I would have gone at first in answering the question. About 15 years ago, early in my 60s, I was a Catholic priest in the Jesuit order and was serving at a retreat house in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And the situation became unbearable for me with the person that was in authority. And so I made an appointment with the equivalent of a Catholic bishop called a provincial in my group of religious men, and went down to see him in Milwaukee, about 75 miles away from where I was stationed in Oshkosh. All I thought I was going to do was have a conversation with this man about where I might go now, where I might be placed, and my next assignment might be. I got down there and had prayed all the way down for the conversation and trust that he was too. And I had a chance, I said maybe my 10 or 15 minutes of opening gambit. And this man said to me, "What are we going to do with you now?" And I knew I had become a problem to this group of men I was part of. I knew at the same time I was healthier probably than I had ever been. And just in his asking me that question, with very little hesitation, I turned and said, "Jim, I think it's over. In fact, I know it's over." As I said it again, this was over 40 years of having been part of this community, and I knew it was over. And I was so confirmed in it as I said it. I didn't have a penny to my name at that point. I had no idea what my future would be, who I might go on with, where I might ever serve, but I knew it was absolutely right. I said it, and we shook hands and talked about how to make arrangements for my basically divorcing from that order of men, and I was on my way. It seemed like it was about 20 minutes later that between John Curtis and George Mann, they were calling me and asking me if I wanted to be spiritual director at the retreat. But at the moment I said it's over, I had no idea, but I knew it was absolutely right. I was naked to the elements and never felt more consoled. Still do to this day as I tell the story. So thank you, John Rosengren, for eliciting that story from your own story with your dad.
Well, and the story you just told was one of making a leap of faith, right? Where that in the hero's journey, you step out not knowing what's going to be there to support you, but trusting that you're going to be okay. And seems like you were.
Trust is built, of course, on a continuity of care. And I knew that I was cared for enough that I could trust that step of stepping out, getting out of the plane and stepping out without a parachute.
Yeah. And if I find too, in response to that question, there are a lot of other smaller moments where I feel the presence of my higher power active or grace. And it's just, it takes me paying attention and being aware. And sometimes I don't recognize them at the moment, but it's afterward, when I'm in the evening, when I'm doing my daily inventory, when I say, oh, wow, that happened and that I wasn't in control of that, but that interaction was meaningful. There's something to learn from that. Or they're just moments of beauty. This morning I walked out of the house and an eagle swooped over our yard. And I just said, thank you. It was wonderful. I never tire of seeing that sort of beauty in nature.
But most people would miss it. You remind me, one of the great holy teachers of the last 50 years has been Tony DeMello, now with God on the other side.
Yeah.
But Tony DeMello, when pressed about what was important in the spiritual life, he said, there are just three things that are important: awareness, awareness, awareness.
Uh-huh.
And I would submit that at the heels of awareness is gratitude.
Although I would say if he's in heaven now, he'd probably change that answer to location, location, location.
Okay, good. Yes.
No, I like that. He's been influential too in my formation and in particular with meditation and we probably haven't talked about that, but that's, I think, another way to improve, right, to enhance our awareness, right, is to pause and to try to quiet our mind and just become more mindful and aware of, maybe it starts with our breath, and then sometimes it leads to an awareness of a power greater than ourselves. But for me, that's a really important part of my recovery, is my daily meditation. I try to sit for 20 minutes, just doing the centering prayer where I'm focused on my breathing. And I find that so calming and powerful. I really miss it when I don't do it. So, yeah.
So we have another question, excuse me, from Carol. How is it that service work, 12-step work, gives us more than we give to the newcomer?
Well, I can answer that. I mean, I think, and Dick, obviously I want to hear what you have to say too, but first off, I think, the 12-step talks about carrying the message to other alcoholics. And that's a big part of, we call it 12-step work when we're talking about service a lot. And there's so many ways to do that. Today I had the opportunity to hear a 5th step. And I'm not sure what the other guy got out of it, but I know for me, it took me back to my core beliefs about recovery, about my higher power. I was able to talk about being able to live consistent with our values and how that leads to integrity, and being helps me. I feel like I'm the person I want to be when I'm living consistent to my values. And so in talking about that with him, I was reminded of that myself. And so I felt that was it was significant for me. This opportunity to hear 5th step helped me tremendously. It was one of the highlights of my day. But I think that service work can happen in so many different ways. It's kind of whenever I'm looking outside myself to do something to benefit others, that I benefit, and it can be as simple as loading the dishwasher, even if it's not my turn or not my dishes, or, that I really think my kids should have done their dishes or whatever, or something as simple as clearing the sidewalk, shoveling the sidewalk, and realizing that if I do it begrudgingly and out of frustration, I don't get anything out of it, but, come back inside wet and grumpy. But if I think, okay, here's an opportunity to be of service to my neighbors, and if I can do it with a spirit of love, I feel good, and I come inside and I'm feeling happy that I got to shovel the sidewalk. So a lot of it is learning for me to have that attitude of take an attitude of service to the action that I'm doing, or the activity. And there's so many opportunities throughout the day for me to do that. And some are small and simple, and some are more profound. But to me, the idea of service doesn't have to be rooted in the 12-step. I mean, it's wonderful when it is, but I think as long as I'm searching out for opportunities to be of service, that's going to help me stay sober. Dick?
About 3 hours ago, I was privileged to receive a phone call, as I do every Thursday at 4:30, from a friend who asked me to coach him and hold him to accountability for his own practice of meditation and prayer. And we have a brief conversation. It's every Thursday. It usually starts with 7 for 7, as he'll report to me, and then a little bit on the quality of what the prayer and the meditation was like. And I just thrill about 4:15 every Thursday afternoon as I look forward to that call coming in. Whatever it means to him, the opportunity to still be of service. I can't quite believe, especially at my age, in my late 70s, that every once in a while our God and the universe calls upon me to still be of service. So I don't know how to compare it to what it might have meant to the caller this afternoon, but it just means the world to me that a God who could have done it any other way still sees fit to use me occasionally on behalf of someone else. That means a lot. So there's a beginning anyway to an answer. Great question.
You seen any other questions coming your way, Saul?
Yes. In moving from fear to faith, what would you recommend?
Mhm.
Well, I have an example of that, going back to the leap of faith that Dick took. When I was in college at St. John's University, at the pool, there was a regular diving board, and then there was a high dive about 5 meters up. And I'd look at that and I'd think, gee, I'd like to go off that. I'd like to try that. I think that'd be a thrill. And so one day I got the courage up to climb the stairs. And as I walked out on the platform, I thought, holy shit, this is higher than I realized. This is really scary to stand here. And at the same time, I thought, but I want to do this. I told myself I wanted to jump off this, and I still think it'd be a thrill. So I want to do it. So I was feeling afraid, but I also knew I wanted to do this. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to take that step. And I did. And I had the thrill of the way going down. And it taught me that I can feel afraid and still do something, that the fear doesn't have to hold me back. And it's in, I think, too, believing that I'll be okay in taking the risk that helps me, I guess, come to that belief that it's okay, and to develop faith, even though I have the fear. And so I think that fear, I can feel the fear, but still act out of faith, if that makes sense.
Well put, John. I like the reminder that fear is an acronym to an extent, false expectations appearing real, especially in this time when we're living politically, certainly, in such a atmosphere of fear. And bless the two political candidates that are about to be debating with each other very soon this evening. But there has been so much preying on our fears. And fear is just a simple, basic human emotion. We all have it. And it is that basic false expectations appearing real, wondering what might happen over what we cannot control. As one works the program, one realizes all I have to control is myself. Any of the circumstances, who's going to get elected, what's going to happen, none of that do I have any power over. All I have is the power to be myself, vote for who I'm going to vote for, maybe speak on behalf of candidates that I want to speak on behalf of, without changing anybody else's mind. I'm not here to particularly influence them. I'm just to share my experience, strength, and hope, and to live in trust. It's going to be particularly important the next 2 weeks to make that conversion from fear to faith in a God who's going to bring us all through this. I don't know how. I don't know what we'll look like on the other side of Election Day, but we will still be a people with a chance to go on being an American people together, whatever that's meant to look like. But the question touches something that is such an important issue for us right now, that we not be so riddled by our fear that we come sideways or backwards into the next 10 days or 2 weeks.
You know, it's interesting, Dick, that you went right to the election or the political situation in talking about fear. And I know for me, my imagination can run wild and go down into, start playing out doomsday scenarios. And I can get so, my fear can get so large when I allow that to happen. And I have to remind myself to come back to the present, to be in the moment of what do I know now, live one day at a time. Again, those lessons that I've learned from the program. And that helps me, come back to my faith. And I think not let my fear take over, because, there are times if I start the day reading the newspaper, my day's spoiled within 5 minutes. And so I'm having to learn or teaching myself and reminding myself to stay present in the moment, because it can be very frightening and overwhelming. And especially too, in having conversations with other people about politics right now, whether I agree with them or not. Either way, it can be frightening. So yeah, it's coming back to the moment. And also I think of turning it over, what I can't control, and trusting that, as you said, we're going to be okay. Hard as that can be to believe it at times, but I have to believe that, I think, to get through it.
You remind me of the little aphorism, courage is simply fear that says its prayers. And then trust that a higher power that we've been speaking of, a caring higher power, will be with us on the other side.
Right.
So we have a question stacking up now, which is good. Here's one for you, John. Is the book meant to be a guide of sorts for those in recovery?
No, it's not. It's a story. And so, I mean, through the course of that story, there are people who struggle with addiction and dealing with addiction, their own and others, and seeking recovery. And there are themes of surrender and grace and even redemption. But it's not a guide by any means. I mean, I think people in recovery will certainly recognize the addiction, the stinking thinking, and that sort of thing. I hope at the same time they'll be entertained. I tried to work some humor into it. And just this idea of a hard drinking nun with an MBA running a treatment center, and the scrapes she gets into. So anyway, I tried to tell a good story, and one that will resonate with people, and they'll find meaningful and worth their time in reading.
Here's another powerful question. Dick or John, can you describe your best example of forgiveness, especially someone that you resented in the past?
That assumes I've forgiven somebody. Oh, God. I know there are examples there, but I'm caught cold. It's like when someone asks me, "Who's your favorite author?" I think, I've read a lot of books, but I suddenly can't answer the question. Dick?
Well, this is a little oblique, but it's starting down that road anyway. The dearest friend I had in this religious community that I was part of, the Jesuits, was not able to make the turn with me. When I left the Jesuits and got married, he was not able to make that turn. God knows why that was. I have to respect that. And it's been a great sadness for me, not exactly a matter of offense and forgiveness, but it's been a great sadness for me. And in the course of time, a friend of both of ours wrote to him, emailed him, this friend, and said, please be reconciled with Dick. This man took that very seriously and got back in touch with me. It's not the same as it was before, nor maybe will it ever be. It is what it is now. But the other day, as it turned out, with the death of Sid Hartman, this friend who lives in another city but is up here about 4 times a year, every Sunday would love to listen to Sid Hartman on Sports Huddle with Dave Mona on CCO. And yet living in Omaha as he does, he would have no idea that Sid Hartman died in all probability. So I just emailed him and said, Larry, it's good to be back in touch. One of your idols, Sid Hartman, died the other day. God bless you with what your life is now. It wasn't exactly the depth of forgiveness that you're inviting with the question, but it was a way of tenderly going on with each other that we both have honored now a few times in being back and forth with one another over something that is very understandable to me, that he found very hard, my separation from him in one of the deepest commitments of our lives together in this community of men we were part of. So that's the beginning of an answer from recent history.
Well, I was just thinking of an individual I'd had a conflict with, and walked away thinking, oh, he's such a jerk, and and then I wound up seeing him in a meeting, and suddenly I felt this sense of compassion for him, and I think it was what John Kirst had mentioned earlier. It's like I saw his vulnerability, and I let him see mine. We're both there saying, yeah, we're alcoholics and need each other's help, and I was able to soften toward him, and I think he did to me. And we realized we had this common experience that was bigger than the disagreement we'd had. And so that's one example that comes to mind of being able to forgive and accept and embrace someone that I'd had a conflict with. And I'm sure I'll think of about 7 more as soon as we get off.
I'll think of a dozen.
Driving me crazy.
Question for John. As an established writer, have you faced any judgment from the public in being a person who has gone through recovery?
That's interesting. I'm always cautious about talking about my experience publicly. I'm very open with friends and everything. I've been in recovery since 1981, so it's a long time I've been sober and in the program and talking about this stuff. So I'm pretty comfortable talking about my recovery and my addiction. But there's that tradition. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, television, and I think internet as well. So the Star Tribune just ran an interview with me earlier this week, and I told the writer, hey, you cannot identify me as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't speak for AA. So anyway, I try to be open about my experience and be honest. But I also don't want to exploit that or come across, like I said, as a spokesperson for the program. I haven't gotten, I guess I haven't gotten, or I can't remember getting any gruff or ridicule from that. Yeah, but because I also look at it as I'm trying to share my experience, strength, and hope with others to help, carry the message. And I think if I'm honest and as sincere as I can be, usually that comes across. So I don't know if that answers the question, but no one's made a movement to kick me out of AA yet, I guess. Yeah.
Another comment here. Sponsorship and fellowship helped me so much to see others walk through fear and show me how to do it as well. We are not alone in this.
Wow, amen. That is, whichever side of sponsorship I'm on, that's an amen to that. Um, I, I've often said I will know the quality of my recovery by the person that I ask to be my sponsor, and then by my willingness to speak with him. At the moment, I have a sponsor who lives in Des Moines. I've never had a phone sponsor before, and he's in another 12-step program than I am, but we both work the 12 steps. And every Wednesday evening, I call Bob, and he's usually all set for me. And we have about a 15-minute give and take that just means the world to me. My wife always knows afterwards if I've spoken with Bob, I'm lit up like a Christmas ornament or a Christmas light. That I've gotten some word of encouragement, some moment of accountability with Bob that makes all the difference to the rest of my week. On the other hand, sponsoring people has been a great joy in my life. But I do say to us that even though sponsorship is not to be found in the big book, thank God it found us early on in our history of recovery in AA and the other 12-step groups. And I just offer it to those who are with us tonight. You will know the quality of your recovery by the sponsor you ask to accompany you. You are worthy of the best sponsor in your world. And hopefully they'll realize the gift it is to them and say yes to going along with you.
Well, I will echo that in the comment by the person who made it of how significant sponsorship can be. I've been very fortunate to have some really good sponsors along the way, and you know, people whose words stick with me. Tom A is one of the guys early on. I was about 5 years sober, living in Paris, and he was just a huge, tremendous influence on my sobriety at the time. But right now I have a sponsor.
Nope.
Works so hard both in the program. He called me at the end of our conversation. Oh, I'm just so grateful, John, for you. You're just a great sponsor. And I think, and I'm so glad I called and talked to you. And I say, Tom, I'm so glad you called and that we talked, because I think I get calls and he doesn't really realize that yet. And what I've told him is, you know, I look forward to the day when you have a sponsee like yourself that just helps you, you know, reflect upon and you put the program to use the way you've helped me do that. And so anyway, like it's a relationship, I think, and we're fortunate to, you know, that it's a part of the program that we practice. So, you know, I would encourage anyone out there who does not have a sponsor to seek a sponsor, and also to raise your hand when they ask who's willing to be a sponsor, because it does, you know, both sides of the relationship benefit us.
And to pick up that last part, John, if you've never been a sponsor, I'd say pray for the grace to be one. It's a real tribute to you if someone asks you to be their sponsor. But I've never been one and I don't know how to do it. What advice would I ever give this person? That's not why they're asking us. If they realize at all, they're asking us to accompany them. We're not here to give advice to each other. We're here to listen to one another's story, share what might be pertinent from our story, and encourage each other on. So I hope you know soon, if you haven't had the grace already of being asked, the grace of being asked to be a sponsor. And if you are, I hope you'll say yes and trust the grace will be given you to sponsor well.
Amen.
We have another question here. I have found that the lower my expectations of others, the higher is my serenity. The same is true of my own behavior. Any thoughts on how the expectation setting helps with peace of mind and serene moments?
a challenging one for me because I remember early on, I got to give a shout out to Pat Myers. She was the woman who did my assessment when I was 17 years old, and I got arrested at a party and brought to detox and then taken in for an assessment. And I thought, oh, if I tell her a little, my strategy was if I tell her a little bit about how I'm using, she'll think I'm being honest, but I can't tell her all about my use because then she'll think I have a problem. So anyway, we talked for about an hour and I thought it had gone pretty well. And she said at the end, "You are the most deluded kid I've ever met." Like, whoa. Now, maybe she said that to all the kids, but it worked for me and I agreed to go into treatment. But I was forever grateful to Pat Myers. And anyway, to answer the question, early on, I remember I'd been completed treatment, but I'd still go back and check in with her and stuff. And she said, you have really high expectations for others. And it struck me that because of those expectations, I was often unhappy with others and not able to appreciate them. And so I do think it's a truism the comment that the person made, that if we are able to, I don't like the idea of lowering expectations because it sounds like we don't want anything from others, but if we just can accept people, or for me, if I can accept people as they are, if I can meet them where they are, if I can allow them to be, just kind of rejoice in who they are as they are, I think I'm a lot happier and probably they enjoy being with me a lot more. Now, I think that's probably hardest for me to do with those closest to me, my wife, my children, my siblings, my mother, but it's a good reminder to me to simply accept others and let them be who they are and not try to shape them into the image that I would like them to be. Because I think that's what I'm doing when I have expectations for others. I want them to be something other than who they are or what they are. So.
You spark a couple of things for me, John, in the wisdom of your words. In another context, one of the wisest things I've ever heard said was said to me by an Ojibwe woman in a conversation we were having in a church context that had nothing to do particularly with what she said, but all of a sudden she just blurted out, Dick, in our community, we are all of the same height. Mm. That was so helpful for me ever since to realize I don't want to be too impressed by someone's history of recovery. We're all in it together. We only have today. If I'm impressed by what someone says, that's for me to be impressed. But it's my issue. So that's something to catch an expectation before I start to canonize somebody or make a statue of them is very important for me, certainly at this time in my life. The other piece of that, Kubler-Ross, God bless her, when she talks about death and dying, goes through all of those stages of denial and wishful thinking and sadness, and finally gets to acceptance. I would say what you say, John Rosengren, about acceptance is pretty much what she's saying to it. To get to acceptance of one another as we are, we have to die a lot to the expectations that we have, which are our expectations, not the other person's. It's not the other person's issue, it's ours. But every marriage, I think, has to get to that point of letting the expectations die to come to accept the other one as she really is, or as he really is. So to get from expectation to reality, there's a real death and dying that goes on, at least for me, to get there. But when someone disappoints me, doesn't meet my expectations, that's not the time for me to leave the relationship. That's the time for me to work with the relationship and allow the other person to become real in my life, because I've elevated them to a point in my own grandiosity or whatever. So there's a lot of dying involved in finally coming, I think, to acceptance of each other as we fully are and ourselves.
Yeah, wow. That's really good. Thanks, Dick. It actually reminded me, in a way, the idea of expectations about something a guy named Dan, who used to go to my Thursday night meeting, he'd say, for him, the key to serenity is to let the driver tailgating pass and not to count the items in the cart of the person ahead of him in the express checkout at the grocery store.
That's right.
It's like I go around thinking, oh, and here's another one. I'm reading that if you read The Courage to Change, the other day, this was in there, I think it was about a week ago, and it said something about cease to cherish your opinions. Cease to cherish your opinions, because the idea is when I so am in love with my opinions and think they're so right that I get judgmental and righteous, and that's where I can have expectations for others. And if I can cease to cherish, I've been trying to do that, just to let go a little bit, has been good. It reminds me too what John Kurtz was saying about our vulnerability, and if we can embrace our brokenness and allow others to have their brokenness, it's more like we're all on the same. It's a level playing field then. That maybe I won't have as high expectations if I can just have compassion for others.
A level playing field. In this community, we're all of the same height. We're all level.
Yeah, right, exactly. Going back to what you said, it's that same idea. We're all the same height. I love that. Yeah. Any final questions, Sunshine?
I love that you call me Sunshine.
I call him that because his name means sun, of course, and he's out. We play hockey together with this recovery hockey, which is sponsored by the retreat too. And so always just seems so happy on the ice. Anyway, so you are like a ray of sunshine out there on the ice.
Thank you. Don't tell that to too many other hockey players, though, because that'll give them a bad rep,
Yes.
You're
having fun. It's about joy. That's great to see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's been a lot of fun. Let's see. We got one other a comment here. So one way to do that, cease to cherish our opinions, is to focus on engaged listening, active listening, paying attention to the other.
Okay, I'll listen to what you have to say about that, Dick.
It is so true. When I was certainly in this political season, if I have the fortune or misfortune to have someone who sees things very differently than I, my first task is to repeat what he or she has just said in the way that they've said it before I give my opinion. That's the only way I know of to walk in another person's shoes as well as my own, and do them the justice of allowing them their life and their opinions. That's my response. What's yours, John?
I think of something that a therapist, Alan Braverman, told me is that idea, I'm okay, you're okay. And so I don't have to be threatened by someone else's view if it's different from mine, but nor do I have to impose my view on them. And so, it's accepting who I am, accepting who they are. And I've also been singing to myself the Beatles song, Let It Be, over and over. I just love that idea. It helps me, remind me to just accept who I am, who others are, and let it be.
Mm.
Well, you guys, we're coming to the end of the meeting, and it's pretty amazing how fast an hour and a half can go by. I just want to really thank you, John and Dick, for this really deep and meaningful conversation. I know I got a lot out of it. I laughed and I cried. So that's my measure on.
But was it better than Cats?
100%, yes. So I put the link in the chat again for everybody to John's book. And why don't we, John? Why don't you just a closing statement, and then Dick can take us out.
Well, thank you so much, so for this, and to the retreat for providing this forum. And thank you, Dick, for, I always get so much listening to you and talking to you. And I'm just really grateful for the chance to be able to have this conversation with you. And thank you everyone who asked questions and provided comments. Yeah, I mean, it's been like a meeting for me. I mean, I'm going to kind of float out of the room here, just feeling uplifted by this conversation. So I'm filled with gratitude. Thanks so much.
I am also. Wow, thank you, John, for including me in and inviting me to speak with you. Sol, for all you did to organize this. Thank you. Couple of things to finish. I have recently been reintroduced to a mantra of Abraham Heschel, the great Jewish rabbi, that is so meaningful to me these days and is kind of centering me whenever I get anxious. Just to be is a blessing. Just to live is holy. I can't recommend that enough as something to just quietly repeat as one centers one's soul. Just to be is a blessing. Just to live is holy. And if you're serious about taking us out, Sol, my wife and I were introduced to a grace by our sister-in-law recently. Again, we've been speaking of grace and gratitude. I just offer it to any of us together tonight for any meal or any period in the course of a day. It's simply, God, thank you for the food before us. Thank you for the friends and family around us. Thank you for the love between us. Thank you for those who have gone ahead of us. Tonight, it's very much for me, George and Marion Mann. God bless them. Amen for me.
Amen. Thank you, Dick. Thank you all.